Hey, welcome back to C programming tutorial. This tutorial is part of the collection of large number of tutorials, and if you might be able to see a link in the playlist, a link of the playlist in the description of this video. If you haven't been watching the previous videos, I would highly recommend that you click on that link, and it will take you to the list of all the tutorials in this series. Now we were actually working on the loops, and we just finished the while loop. In this particular example, what we had done in the previous lecture, if you haven't watched it, I would recommend that you do that. In the previous lecture, what we did was we basically, let me start the timer here. In the previous lectures, the tutorial just before it, what we did was basically we did an example for while loop in which we basically input a number from the user, and then we print this message as many times as the user has entered this thing, and and we did this using the while loop. Now today we are going to learn about the for loop, another kind of loop which basically does what it does is it allows you to its purpose is the same purpose. It allows you to do something that you have to do repeatedly. So whenever you have something to do repeatedly, you should either consider a while loop or a for loop. And here is the syntax of for loop. What it does is it basically kind of takes three parameters, three things that you have to specify in the for loop. One is the initialization of your variables, and then you have to put a semicolon here, and then you have to put the condition, and then you have to put an expression or a statement to basically modify the condition, and followed by the set of statements, which basically statement 1, statement 2, which comprises of the body of the of the for loop. That's what you call the body of the for loop. Just like the body of the if statement, the body of the while statement, this is the body of the for loop. Now what does that mean? The initialization, condition, and statement. So let's take the same example here, and instead of doing the while loop, let's do it with the for loop here. So let me put this in the comments so that it doesn't bother the compiler, because these are not the valid C statements. And these are definitely I'm just showing this syntax here. So it's going to give you an error if you just start compiling this. So let's put it in comments. Putting a slash basically tells the compiler to ignore that line. So we tell the compiler ignore this line, ignore this line, ignore that. This is a good way of basically taking something off and still leaving in the program. So for the compiler purposes, this is basically not part of the program. Anyway, all from here to here. Anyway, so let's do this. So what we have to do, we have to basically we have to use the for loop to do the same thing. What are we trying to do? We are basically inputting a number here from the user, and we are going to print a message. This is the information age. This is the message that we have to print. This is the information age. As many times as the user entered, and we captured in this variable count. This is the information age. So obviously this statement has to be in the body of the for loop. Okay. Now initialization. So what do we initialize here? The loop counter variable. This is called loop counter variable, and we have called it loop counter here because this is going to be counting how many times loop is executing. So we initialize it. Even though we have already initialized it here, we still can initialize it here, or we may not initialize it here, and we just initialize it right here. That's totally up to you. And then we will need is a condition here. The condition will be basically for as long as this condition is true, these statements here, which are part of the body of the for loop, these statements will be executed. As soon as the condition becomes false, these statements will be skipped, and the control is going to come over here, and it will start executing from whatever is after this for loop. Now see this in while loop, it was important that we have at least one statement here that would change the values of the variables used in the condition, so that the condition could become false eventually, so that the loop is exited out. Otherwise the loop will continue to execute forever. Unless you want that to happen, you should have at least one statement here that will change the value of the variables used in this condition here. But here, I was talking about the while loop. In for loop, this is not necessary. Here, these statements may or may not change the condition, the variables in this condition, because we have this statement, a separate statement specific to change the value of at least one variable here in this condition. So in this particular example, we will need, our condition will be that for as long as the number of times you have executed the loop is less than the number of times that the user wants it. So number of times that you executed the loop is being tracked in this loop counter variable is less than the number of times that user wants you to execute, which is captured in this count variable. So we are going to put it here. So our condition part is ready. Loop counter is less than count. So we put the semicolon at the end, and then what do? We basically increment the loop counter every time when it executes. So remember the way the for loop works is basically it initializes first. It does the initialization. In other words, it will make the value of loop counter equal to 0. Then it evaluates this condition. Even before it runs the body of the loop, it basically, first thing it does, it checks to see if this condition is true or not. If the condition is false right away, this body of the for loop will be skipped totally. It won't even be executed. So then what it does is it executes the body of the loop, then comes here and runs this statement, which basically is saying that increment the value of the loop counter. And then it evaluates this condition again. And if this condition is still true, it will run this loop, the body of the loop. Otherwise, it will skip it and exit out of the loop. So it will go back, and if it executed it, if the condition was still true, if it executed it, it will come back here and increment it. Or it will run this statement, whatever you have told it to do here, and then it will check against this condition again, and so on. So suppose the user enters 2 here, so the value of count is 2. The loop counter variable value will become 0 here. Then it evaluates the condition. Is 0 less than 2? The answer is yes. So the condition is true. So it executes this statement, which means that it prints this information out. Then it comes here and then increments the value of loop counter. So now the value of loop counter becomes 1. So the value of loop counter is 1, and then it basically evaluates this condition again. Is 1 less than 2? Because the value of count is 2, the user entered 2. The answer is true. It comes here, it executes this statement second time, which means it prints this message second times, and then it comes here and increments the value of loop counter, which makes the value of loop counter to be equal to 2. And then loop counter is less than 10. Is the less than 2? Is it less than 2? Is 2 less than 2? The answer is false. No, the 2 is not less than 2. It is equal to 2. So the answer of this condition is false. Then basically it exits out of the loop at this point. And it has already printed 2 times, which is what the user has asked us to print, as many times as the user has asked us to do. So let's run this program real quick. Okay, there is an error in the compilation. And what is the error? The error is this additional 2 that I wrote. So let's run it. How many times? Say 5 times. Ta-da! It runs it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So our code is perfect. Thank you for watching this tutorial. This will continue in the next lecture. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel, or if you're watching it on Facebook, you make sure that you become a fan, and make sure that you give the 5 stars to this video. Thank you.